When we talk about legendary 4x4s, oftentimes the Toyota Land Cruiser and Land Rover Defender dominate the conversation. But there's one other vehicle that shouldn't be overlooked, and that's the Nissan Patrol. And pound for pound, it's one of the toughest, best value rigs you can build your adventures on. It's the unsung hero of the off-road world. And that is exactly why I chose it. Everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Vince Brody, and today we're going to be talking about why I chose the Nissan Patrol over the Toyota Land Cruiser and Land Rover Defender. But before we get into that, let's dive into a little bit of history on the Nissan Patrol. The Nissan Patrol first hit the scene in 1951 as Nissan's answer to the Jeep. And over the years, it's become one of the most respected 4x4s in the world. The MQ and MK Patrols of the 70s and 80s were leaf-sprung workhorses that laid the foundation. Then in 1987 came the Y60, or better known as the GQ Patrol in Australia. And this was the real game changer because it came with coil-sprung suspension and introduced bulletproof engines like the TD42 diesel or the TB42 petrol inline 6. And the GQ Patrol was offered in both the long wheelbase and short wheelbase variants. Europe received the smaller 2.8 liter diesel version. Each market was shaped by local demand, but there was one thing common to all of them: an uncompromising, overbuilt 4x4 vehicle. By 1997, Nissan launched the Y61, known as the GU Patrol. It was also offered in both a short wheelbase and long wheelbase variant. The GU built on the toughness of the GQ Patrol. It had bigger brakes, bigger CVs, and bigger diffs. It also added new engine variants like the ZD30 Turbo Diesel, the TB45, and the legendary TB48. The GU brought the Patrol world-renowned fame. It became an iconic 4x4 vehicle in the Middle East. In fact, after it was discontinued in 2014 in other parts of the world, the GU Patrol continued to be sold in the UAE. In fact, I think today you can still buy a brand new GU. Then in 2010, Nissan released the Y62, a completely different beast with independent front suspension. Nissan opted to go all in on power and luxury. It released the 5.6 liter V8 petrol engine. And while the Y62 retained its popularity, most purists still prefer their solid axle GU and GQ Patrols. And fast forward to today, we're finally on the Y63 model. Originally launched in the United States as the 2025 Nissan Armada, we're finally sharing the same bones as the Global Patrol. But for me, the sweet spot will always be the GQ Patrol. An uncompromising, overbuilt, easy to work on, legendary and bulletproof 4x4 vehicle. So now that we have the history, let's get back to why I chose the Patrol. There were really two main reasons why I chose the Nissan Patrol over the Toyota Land Cruiser and Land Rover Defender. And those are price and value for toughness. But before we get into that, let's take it back to the beginning. So in 2014, I moved to Guatemala and finally had a chance to buy a 4x4 Icon that we never got in the US. And at the top of the list were the 70 Land Cruiser, the Defender, and the Patrol. But after doing a little research and digging deeper into the market, I purchased this 1990 TD42 Patrol for 35,000 Guatemalan quetzales, roughly 4,500 United States dollars. And for comparison, a similar year Land Cruiser Troopy or pickup costed 5 times that amount at around $20,000. And even the smaller RJ70 Land Cruiser was 1.5 to 2 times more expensive than the Patrol, and its 2.4 liter 22R engine left a lot to be desired. On top of that, Toyota was the #1 stolen vehicle in Guatemala, including for its parts. And so I wasn't about to sink a big investment into a truck that might disappear overnight. The Defender, both the 90 and 110, were also at the top end of my budget. And while they carry incredible cool factor and unbeatable resale value here in the US, their parts are expensive and service can cost nearly double that of Nissan and Toyota. So from a price standpoint, the Land Cruiser and Defender were out of reach for me, especially for the build that I had in mind. But there was a second point that was also important to me: value for toughness. No doubt, the 70 Series Land Cruiser is known for its reliability and go-anywhere mobility. But there were a few factors that just kept me from purchasing that vehicle beyond price. The first one was it had rear leaf springs. The second was the rear axle was shorter in width. And the third, it was just prone and known for high wheel lifts because of those issues. So when compared to the coil spring suspension on the Patrol, it was a no-brainer for me. As for the Defender, its heritage is unmatched. The Camo Trophy cemented its place in Overland history, and there's a reason why that Ineos replicated its design with the Grenadier. But anyone who's owned a Defender knows how quirky they can be. The mechanical layout can feel almost upside down to the Japanese vehicles, and you're constantly chasing gremlins with repairs, and the parts are quite expensive. And while the Defender looks and performs incredibly, they're not that practical to maintain. The Patrol, on the other hand, gave me everything I was looking for. A TD42 engine, known for running up to 500,000 kilometers, front and rear coil suspension, front and rear solid axle, and while the driveline components needed some upgrades, I knew that I could take this truck anywhere I wanted to go. And plus, with Australia leading the way, I knew I could draw a lot of inspiration from down under. And so for me, the Patrol wasn't just a smart buy, it was a chance to finally build my dream rig. And by build, I mean multiple iterations. It started in black and gray, and then I tried to paint it the sandy taupe from the Land Cruiser, but that didn't exactly go my way. So I repainted it a darker graphite gray, similar to that of the Hilux. And that build took on a jungle-ready expedition style design that stayed that way until 2020. Then in 2020, I resprayed it this black and gray color that you're seeing today, similar to that of Graham's Shorty from 24/7 4-wheel drive. And since having it back in the States, my focus has been making this Patrol more road-worthy. But to be fair, like all vehicles, the Patrol does have its weak spots. Number one is the cooling system. The undersized radiator and cavitating water pump struggle in heat. And so that tends to cause the TD42 to overheat when it's pushed too hard. And the second is the front driveline. Unlike the GQ has weaker brakes, CVs, and diffs, as well as steering components. Now, while many of those can be fixed by switching out to the GU components or with upgraded parts, you still have to keep that in mind. Number three, the rear upper and lower control arms tend to be very weak, so upgrading those to more heavy-duty control arms will be to your benefit. The rear coil tower also tends to crack, so it's a good idea to keep an eye on that. The front hubs are also a common weak spot, but from everything that I've read, adding saber rings and keeping to the OEM hubs are the best way to go. The engine and gearbox mounts are another weak spot. Matter of fact, I just replaced mine. And the last two common weak spots have to do with the engine and rust. The TD42 can be underpowered, so adding a turbo can really boost your performance, and it's always a good idea to look for rust spots on the roof rails and inside the vehicle. Despite all of these issues, they all have upgraded paths. For example, I've replaced my upper and lower control arms with adjustable Dobinsons and Superior Engineering parts. My steering components are all Chromoly Super Engineering tie rods. The front and rear panhard rods are Chromoly Ironman parts. I replaced the radiator with a custom and larger 3-row radiator. I've recently replaced my injectors, fuel filters, and I'm about to replace my glow plugs. Also recently added new front wheel assembly hubs, bearings, and brakes. And while there's still more that I'd like to do, no doubt in my mind the GQ Patrol is the best value rig. So at the end of the day, I chose the Nissan Patrol because it embodied everything I was looking for in an Overland rig. Price, value for toughness, affordability, simplicity, reliability, durability, and I knew that it had a large network of aftermarket parts. And with the Toyota Land Cruiser and Land Rover Defender already being very popular legendary 4x4 vehicles in the US, I wanted to stand out. I wanted something a little bit different, and the Nissan Patrol gave me that. And at the time of purchase, I knew I wanted to take an Overland rig into the jungle, so I needed something really tough and bulletproof. And in my mind, the selection was clear. The GQ Patrol was the way to go. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video on why I chose the Nissan Patrol over the Toyota Land Cruiser and Land Rover Defender. If you want to learn more about how I imported the Nissan Patrol, tune in for a future video where I describe the exact steps that I took to import the Nissan Patrol from Guatemala to the US. And if you're liking this content, don't forget to hit like and subscribe. I'll see you guys around.